Since its conception, modern entertainment seems to be scrutinised for its sometimes vulgar acts of violence, explicit content and bad language, but also being scrutinised for addressing sensitive themes such as sexism and racism. But does the depiction of these acts on screen influence the way we look at them in real life? In this presentation, I will discuss whether violent shoot-'em-up video games have a negative influence on their
audience.
audience.
And to death because of violent video games, that we are injuring our young people, in some cases grievously.
Whether you're playing Call of Duty, Far Cry, or even Space Invaders, the themes and conventions of these games always seem to revolve around death, chaos, and destruction. But how much of this do we take away with us in our everyday life? Studies have linked violence in the virtual world to violence in the real world. A study conducted by the APA suggested that, quote, the research demonstrates a consistent relation between violent video game use and increases in aggressive behaviour, aggressive cognitions, and aggressive effects, and decreases in pro-social behaviour, empathy, and sensitivity to aggression. Which makes sense in a way. If an audience member is religiously playing a violent game, they may adopt traits and habits from the character they are playing, swapping some elements of the real world for the virtual world. However, a study conducted by Christopher J. Ferguson from the Texas A&M International University suggested that a game cannot transfer morals and personality traits from a particular character in the player's real life. Furthermore, real-life crimes have been apparently influenced by video games is irrelevant, as 1.2 billion people in the world play video games. Not necessarily violent, however, most of them will display typical themes of violence. If the argument on the influence of video games in real-life crime was correct, we would see a lot more video game-influenced crimes in the news. In my opinion, yes, video games can influence a person to commit a crime. However, they influence the already vulnerable and mentally disabled. Other factors such as socio-economics, upbringing and trauma can also have an effect when discussing influence on crime. However, it's not as simple as saying video games cause real-life violence. Other factors take part as well. Instead of complaining about video games as the fundamental cause of crime, governments and organisations can work in improving mental health care, and the American government can stop selling guns.
Okay.
I'd spotted an ad in the local Michigan paper that said if you opened an account at North Country Bank, the bank would give you a gun.
All of the research you will find on the subject will more than likely contradict one another, and it's hard to determine which one of the studies are correct, which is why I asked 4 people, 2 play video games a lot, and the other 2 not as much, to see how their personalities traits differ depending on their playing habits. Now, do you feel that there's a slight distinction between non-gamers and gamers?
At one point, everyone's kind of always played a game, so I think it's not just games in life and in society that annoy people. I mean, if you miss your train or something, that can agitate you. So
I agree with that.
So as much as you might get annoyed that you keep getting killed in a game, if you keep missing your train, then it's just circles.
Circles.
I believe there is a distinct difference, mostly because gamers normally defend games when they're accused of violence, and non-gamers attack games.
So what would you say, is there any sort of personality differences? Is there any, say you get the common argument that gamers can sometimes be more agitated and more angry at things rather than non-gamers, would you agree or would you disagree?
I'd have to disagree. It's more of a personality trait than like video games causing agitation. It's more of a human thing than video games.
Now you two are under the category of non-gamers, would you agree? Is there a particular reason why you don't play video games on a regular basis?
You could be getting a video game, you could get, the goal might be getting lots of money or levelling up, but at the end of the day, you can't go to a job interview and say, listen, I'm RuneScape, I'm level 94.
Do you feel like you have changed since you've started playing video games? Have you become any angrier, any more violent?
No, not really. It's because it's just a video game. Turn it off and it goes away.
Yeah, they've not made me more angry or violent.
Are you for or against the argument that violent video games, have a negative impact on a person's brain and may cause them to commit crimes, such as murder?
Oh yeah. Like, I think video games do influence people's behaviours and ideas and lead them to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Thank you.
I strongly disagree with that. I think that I strongly disagree because I mean, if you get a 12-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 40-year-old, and they all played the same game for a certain amount of time, and then you gave them a gun, would their first thought be, I'm going to shoot endlessly at the public? And I think the answer is no.
I would say no as well.
Thank you.
I'm strongly against it. 'Cause
strongly against
it's
as well.
stupid.
It just doesn't make sense. Like, you could say that about any kind. You could say painting has caused violence. Like, you could say about anything. Oh, that table's caused violence. It's stupid.
Many theories have surfaced discussing how audiences consume and are affected by media texts. One includes the hypodermic needle theory, which suggests that a media text can inject ideologies into their audiences. This theory could be used to argue that video games do in fact inject violent ideas into their audience. Another is the uses and gratifications theory by Bloomler and Katz. This theory suggests that the audiences actively pick out media texts and integrate it in their own lives. They use certain media texts as an example of their own persona, so a male audience may use violent video games in order to gratify their own masculinity. The two-step flow theory developed by Katz and Nazarfield suggests that information from the media moves down in two stages. First travels from the source to the opinion leaders, for example celebrities. They then influence the audience through their opinion on the media texts. Apart from all the negative comments made about violent video games, some positive effects have been studied, including improvements in spatial awareness, memory, quicker decision making, and problem solving skills. Maybe in the future we can see more benefits of video games in an educational environment, apart from quizzes and leapfrog. For centuries now, people have questioned the effects of entertainment to their audience. The passivity of watching a film or playing a game can bring on the impression that an audience member is mentally vulnerable, exposed to subconscious information they should not be absorbing. But we are as much as a threat to this in real life than we are in virtual life. If all the theories were true, the influenced audiences would have been a major problem derived from the Shakespearean plays and the Edgar Allan Poe stories. Violent films have been questioned, literature has been questioned, and now video games have been questioned on their influence to their audiences. The next source of cultural entertainment and storytelling will have the same controversy. The fact of the matter is that everything can influence the way we perceive things and the way we react to things. But it's not just one external source that is to blame for crime or an action. It's multiple things and individual experiences that may make them act a certain way. So of course films, books and games make us act a certain way, but so does everything else in our life. To blame one existential source for our mistakes and action is ludicrous.